I am so delighted to be chairing this Worldview address with the magnificent Paul Feig, a man who makes the world look beautiful, a man who makes you laugh deep within your gut, and most importantly for me, a man who has enabled an entire generation of young girls to grow up thinking they too can wear a proton pack on their back. Welcome, Paul Feig.
Thank you, Sue. My gosh, thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's an honor to be here.
Well, listen, that is an extraordinary roll call of magnificence, that VT we've just shown. But what strikes me is that you are able to span both television and film in what you do. Is that a deliberate thing to do both and to keep both irons in the fire?
Yeah, I mean, I really love television, and movies have always been my passion, and that's what I always wanted to do forever. But I kind of couldn't. It was harder to get movies made, and I had this idea forever because I was an actor for a long time and a stand-up comedian, but I was writing, and I always had this idea to do a show about high school, but about what I knew from high school, which was all the high school shows were about kind of cool people dating.
And the jock.
And the jock, and they were cool with having sex. It was like a big soap opera. It's like when I was in school, we were just complete nerds, and we were there with like half of us. There were the popular kids who seemed adjusted that way, but then there's all of us who were nerds, and then there was the burnouts, like the druggies, whatever you would call them. We called them freaks in our school, and we were all the outsiders. And I was like, I never see the outsiders portrayed. It's either the nerd with the tape on his glasses and he's snorting, or the druggies are killing people. So we all ended up in drama class together, because that's where we all would come together, all the disaffected of us. And so I thought that should be a TV series. And my friend Matt Reeves created Felicity with J.J. Abrams, and when I saw that pilot, an hour-long format, I thought, well, that's fun, because then it can kind of be like a movie, but it can also be a TV show, and that's where it came from. But I love movies; are my passion. That's really what I love to do. But TV's fun.
But as you say, they're a more long form project. You'll write something, and maybe it'll be how long? 5 years, 4 or 5 years before it might come to fruition.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, sometimes you develop movies forever, and TV shows too. You know how hard it is to get something on. My only thing I stress out about with TV is I like things that are finite. And the goal of TV is for it to go forever.
Yeah.
And it's so stressful for me. But I like a movie. You just get in there. We spend a year. It's all you think about, and then it's done, and then off you go.
You mentioned Freaks and Geeks. Perhaps it might be an opportune time to just share a clip with everyone to remind them, if that's okay. I know we're moving clips asequentially, but seeing as we've discussed it, look at how many extraordinary stars were basically conceived in the cradle of this extraordinary TV show. So just to give you the roll call of those whose careers you launched in Freaks and Geeks, you've got James Franco, Seth Rogen, Jason Segel, Linda Cardellini, Busy Phillips, Martin Starr, and was voted by Time magazine one of the top 100 greatest TV shows of all time. So you obviously have a knack for spotting new voices. Does it give you still joy to kind of find people who are possibly sort of loitering in the shadows and propelling them into stardom?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing is discovering people, and I have the greatest resource ever, which is the amazing casting director, Allison Jones, who's really the mother of modern comedy. I mean, she has this ability to find these amazing people. So when you have these audition sessions, even though you're seeing tons of people, you're always going like, God, everyone's so interesting and different. But the casting process is very fascinating because, everybody comes in. Since I was an actor for so long, I just have such sympathy when they come in. And Judd would always make fun of me. He said, everybody leaves one of your auditions thinking they have the role. You're like, oh my God, you're so great. Oh, thanks. And sincerely want everybody to be good.
You've been an actor, so you understand the roll call of rejection.
Totally. How many times I would walk out of an audition feeling awful, and I did one audition with a famous star who was producing the show, but I won't say his name. But I came in. He sat behind his desk, he looks at me, and then he goes back to this magazine. I'm reading, he's just like looking at a magazine. It's like, why don't you just tell me to stop? Just tell me to leave. You know it's not going to be good.
But that's just a sort of horrific power trip to make somebody in a sort of lesser position of authority feel shit.
It's just terrible. So I don't want them to have that experience. But also when you're in there, you really try to visualize every person in the role. And sometimes you're just like, no, they're just not right. But there's so many times that you're like, oh yeah, they could be good. They could be good. But then when the person comes in who was perfect, it just blows everybody else out of the water, and you don't remember anybody else. You're just like, oh, this person is it. And so that's, if you go on that kind of gut instinct, I find that you generally find these people who not only are perfect for that role, but have this kind of deep talent. Because there's something about them that that charisma kind of blasts through, and they're also an interesting personality. And so that's why for auditioning, I never limit it to kind of like, it has to be this type and this age and this look, and it's like, no, let everybody in who is anywhere close to what we need.
So it's a very open casting call.
Yeah, because the worst thing you can do, and I see this happen all the time, is people are like, oh my God, that person was so great. Oh, if only they were a foot taller, or if they weren't, this or that, we'd cast them. And it's like, if that person's so great, don't let them leave. You're not Shakespeare. Change the script, change the character. Because why would you let that person get away?
And in terms of, you've seen a lot of people audition. What are the standout auditions for you over the years? People you've seen come in and just blow you away, as you say.
Well, it's happened a number of times. Melissa McCarthy, when she came in for Bridesmaids, because we've been trying to cast that role for a while. And everybody we saw was really good, but just it wasn't that thing. And then she came in, and her audition was so weird that for the first 15 seconds, I was watching, I didn't know what she was doing.
What was she doing?
She was doing this kind of really butch thing, and I was like, no one's ever read it like that before. And then, 15 seconds in, I'm like, that's really funny. And then you're just kind of like, oh my God. And so then, but I didn't know if she was playing it straight or gay. And so I assumed, okay, she's playing it gay, which is a really fun way to do this. So I said, all right, so now let's do an improv, because we always do an improv in it. And said, do it like you're trying to get her to go out, on the town with you. So then she starts to do that, and suddenly it's like, yeah, we're gonna get all these guys, and we're just gonna eat them alive and stuff. So I'm like, wait, what is this character?
Yeah.
And she walked out, and she's, has said in interviews since, she walked out thinking she had completely blown it. And I was just like, oh my God, we found her, she's so great. And we actually ended up rewriting the script to give her more stuff to do.
But that's the genius of you, because you've been an actor and you understand what it's like. You allow people to be the best of themselves. You're also a writer. You can be flexible with the script, and you will give everybody that you direct an improv pass, so that you're just the least precious filmmaker, I think, in the world, and that's in part, I think, why your films are so unique. And weirdly, the more power you give to other people, the more it becomes a Paul Feig film.
I have no patience for control freaks, and having been one, before Freaks and Geeks, I was one of these, so precious about the words. Oh my God, don't touch this, don't touch that. And then when we sold Freaks and Geeks as a script, the network literally said, don't change a word. We love it. So I'm just like, as a writer, you're like, oh my God, this is the gift from heaven. So we go into pre-production on it, and Judd says to me, he says, all right, let's tear the script apart. And I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, he came up under Gary Shandling, and Gary Shandling's whole thing was like, just keep tearing it apart. If you screw it up, you got the one that's really good, just go back to that. But it took me 2 weeks of kind of fighting and being precious to slowly kind of go, as I'm rewriting it and we're doing all this stuff, I'm going actually this is getting a lot better. Because the original draft was very good, but it was a little soapy. It had a couple of soapy elements to it. And so I was able to rewrite and get that out of there. And by doing that, I realized, oh God, if I had been inflexible, I would have ended up with something that wasn't as good. And so it really taught me to not be that way about words. And then once, we didn't do a lot of improv on Freaks and Geeks because our schedule was so tight and we weren't kind of playing in that world yet. But when I got to my movies, then it was a realization of now we're here. Again, like you were saying, it takes years to get something up sometimes. And so you work so hard, and then that moment, you're finally there in front of the cameras. It's taken all this time, all this money, everything. Why would you then go all right, just say the lines like this and let's get out of here? It's no, now will we play? Because you have the greatest script in the world, and even rehearse it and stuff. But once you get on the set and people are looking at each other and they're interacting, and the way the eyebrow moves and then you're like, oh, try this, try that, try this. Surprise me. I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to throw stuff at you. So by the time we walk away from a scene, we've just milked every possible way we could do it out of it. You don't go off script in the sense of just go bananas. You just we have to get to A to B. We have to get this information out, this emotion out. But however we get there, let's have fun. And then the performers shine. I've got, when I go into the edit and do test screenings, and I've got material, you're like, well, that didn't work. Try that. Let's try that.
Oh, so that's, I mean, I wanted to ask about that. So you can be, as you say, the more you've got in the edit, the more flexible you can be. But often you'll do a test screening, and if someone doesn't laugh, you'll think, that's okay, we've got 3 more gags that we improved.
The most terrifying thing you could ever do, in my opinion, when you shoot a comedy is only shoot the jokes on the page. Because, I cannot tell you how many times we would go into a test screening going like, this joke's gonna destroy, and this joke's terrible. And the one that's gonna destroy gets nothing, and the one we think is terrible tears the house down. And so you just have to be confident enough to know that you have no confidence in what you think you know, because I know enough to go, I know these things could be funny, but I just don't know how it's gonna add up. And that's, on a shoot, it's very interesting because a shoot can be going great, and the people love the dailies and all this stuff, and I'm always just going like, let's just see if it adds up. Because sometimes all those pieces are so great on their own, and the minute you string them together, they don't work, or the thing that was gonna be great just is poisoned by something down the line. And so editing is really about, we always say like, generally the problem isn't with the scene we think there's a problem with, it's the problem happened 10 minutes earlier. If something we set up or whatever that then invalidated the scene or made it repetitive or
I suppose it's also juggling all the exposition that you naturally write into to a film, and then how much you can remove in an edit, because the story is actually much more clear than you imagined.
Yeah, I mean, I love the editing process. It's my favorite. I love working with actors, but I also kind of suffer through production, because for me, production's the time when you can screw everything up. It all can go terrible, and you can be going gangbusters for the whole time, and then the last day you completely blow something, and you've got a missing piece of your puzzle.
And has that happened? Have you done shoots where things have just been...
I had one shoot where it didn't fall apart creatively, but it just fell apart, just the personal politics on the set. The last half of the day just completely went into the toilet. And suddenly I was in a fight with my DP, and one of my actors passed out. And she's like, oh my God, how could this possibly happen? So you just never know. So it's everything falls apart either the very beginning of a project or the very end of the project. And the scariest thing about the end of the beginning of the project is where the fatal flaw can happen. And it's something, a lot of times it's something you don't even realize. Let's say like, oh, yeah, we'll give a crazy hairstyle to this person, and then go through make all this stuff, and the audience, when you're screening, they're like, I can't stop looking how stupid his hair is, and you're like, oh my God, no, none of us saw that fatal flaw. And then at the end, it's these last-minute decisions where you're like, I'll try this, throw this in. We haven't tested it, but let's just throw it in, and then suddenly you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. So I'm very, very religious about test screenings.
So you've always understood your audience. You've always understood what people want, because you love going to the movies and you want to give people this sort of rich, brilliant, hilarious, inclusive experience. And so, as you've said, you'll let an audience kind of semi-dictate what material goes in at some point in the edit. Yeah. How about the studio? How much input do they have? I mean, not as joyful, I imagine, for you, but when they do.
Well, I mean, I've always kind of, when I lecture to film students and whatever, I say, like, don't ever just shut out notes. Notes are very valid. Solutions are usually the bad part of people's notes. So they'll go like, I don't understand this, so you should do this. It's like, no, don't tell me how to fix it. We'll figure that out. What is your problem with it? Because those, in general, sometimes they're not, but most of the time, if you really dig through it and you find the core of it, they didn't understand this, they were confused by that. Those are very valid, because an audience will just tear you apart if they don't understand something. And so you've got to get to the heart of that. But with the studios, another reason why I like to do the test screenings is I've got empirical evidence. So there's nothing worse than like fighting with somebody about if a joke is funny. So like, well, here, let's listen to the tape, Oh,
so you'll tape a load of people in the movie theater screaming their balls off.
Yeah, we record the sound. Sometimes we'll even videotape them with night vision so you can see if they're bored or falling asleep.
Like something on a spring watch for those.
It's the most disturbing thing in the world to watch an audience watch your movie. Like, whenever my editor turns on, I'm like, oh, just turn the video off. I can't watch that. I just want to hear if they can laugh.
So you can watch, I mean, on multi-screens, you can watch what the audience is seeing and their reaction in real time, and you can go, that's not... Yeah. Or they're intrigued then, or they're... And particularly the films, I guess, that you do, because they are sort of genre crushing. You'll take two genres and you'll fuse them together to make something new and wonderful. We'll talk about Ghostbusters in a bit, but in that, you want to deliver thrills and spills as well as comedy. So I suppose your eye has to be focused on jumping and, you know.
No, it's so true. And just, I don't want, I will never fight for a joke that doesn't work, you know? And so, you know, the studio and I can be talking about a joke. If I play it and it gets a giant laugh, I'm not taking it out. And if they play it and it gets nothing, I'm taking it out. And I've had every once in a blue moon, I've had a fight with somebody at the studio I had one, I won't say the movie or anything, but one studio head who argued with me that a joke didn't get a laugh. And I'm like, I kept playing it over and over. And you hear like the whole room goes crazy with this. He goes, it didn't get a laugh, because he hated the joke. And so I was like, well, guess what? So.
And how many, I mean, you know, if it goes down well in Nebraska, do you just go, that's a great joke? Or do you then take it to Connecticut or take it to Houston? Or do you have to get the full span of the American population?
What I've found, it's like when you watch an election. I don't know, in the American elections, they do this all the time. They do it here, where they go like 1.1% of the precinct has been counted, so we're calling it for this. Because you get 400 people kind of off the street in a theater, and you get a pretty good overview of humanity. It's very, very weird that way, because you get all kind of types, and so we find that it's pretty accurate. Like, what we find out tends to match up no matter where we do it. There are some areas that are a little tougher. Wimbledon is a very tough place to screen in, I just learned.
Where is tough?
Wimbledon, for some reason.
Really?
They're very like this. They sit there like this the whole time.
Yeah.
Come on, folks, give it up. Because then they'll say, oh, it was really funny. It's like, well, I didn't know from that. So.
Yes, there's a reserve about Wimbledon.
There is a reserve.
There's a certain reserve. I would go to Liverpool. That's a good time city. Always screen everything there.
Oh, good, excellent. There
or
we go.
Here, or Glasgow.
Well, here's the best.
We obviously saw the clip of Freaks and Geeks, and you've talked a bit about using outsider voices. You know, you've come from a place where you felt, not part of the mainstream, outside the glass, looking in. But perhaps what you're best known for is giving voice to brilliant female comics and actors and populating the cinematic universe with their stories. I think, can we play a clip of The Magnificent Bridesmaids?
Oh. 2 Academy Awards that movie was nominated.
And rightfully so, should have won both. I mean, it never fails to render me absolutely speechless with laughter. That is an extraordinary roll call of female talent. Why are you consistently so drawn to bringing those sort of voices and those brilliant women into the light?
Because I just felt that, comedy has so ghettoized women for so long in a way that it wasn't that, in the 30s and 40s, you look at those movies and, men and women were equal in movies. I love all the old screwball comedies and things like that. And then I just watched as I was, a kid, and all my best friends were girls and women. And then I'd watch these comedies, and they were all the women were relegated to just being props, or being, kind of tortured by the cool guys, or they're the terrible girlfriend, or the mean wife, or the perfect girl. And once I moved out to LA, especially, and I started befriending all these female comedians and actresses, and I'd then see them in movies, and they were so funny, and then I'd see them in a movie, and they weren't being allowed to be funny. They were being mean, and I was like, why is this happening? And I just like telling stories. I just relate to women's stories more, I guess, and thought, well, I want to do this. And so honestly, the first time I really got to do it was on Freaks and Geeks with Lindsay's character. She's the one I had kind of invented out of whole cloth, because it was based on me as a kid, but I always wished I was an only child, and I always wished I had an older sister. And so I basically invented my perfect older sister in her, and then I put all of my 35-year-old at the time angst onto her, because I figure a 16-year-old girl is about the emotional maturity level of a 35-year-old man. And some not even that close. President accepted. And I just had so much fun writing that character. And then I just was like, I just want to keep doing this. And I had a hard time pitching shows and movies between that and Bridesmaids, because I would, and always about this woman who, oh no, well, it can be a man. And I didn't know enough about the business to know how fucked up that was.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I guess they know something I don't know. I'm so embarrassed that I pitched a woman for the lead in this movie. And then you say, like, well, wait, why is that a problem? Well, internationally we can't sell it. And I was like, well, that seems ridiculous that you're just going to accept that? Like, half the population of the world can't be starring in films? And so that's why it's said, like, well, no, let's change it, So, and that's why, by the time I got to making, like, Spy, I was, I'd been told, female-led, action movies won't work. It's like, well, let's make one that's so much fun, it's got a lot of action, and then we'll try to break that down. It actually did really well internationally. So, you just got to keep hammering against that wall to break these old preconceived notions, because Hollywood's not like an evil town. It's not like they're like, let's keep women out of it. It's just this weird default setting of business and will our things show, and then they just go, oh, every time people would come into our offices to pitch something, the pitch would always start the same way, whether a man or woman was pitching. A lot of times, it's about this guy who, and I was like, does it have about a guy who? Can it be about this woman who? And we've had a few projects. We've got one that's going on right now on NBC that's going into production where, it came in, and I was like, well, could this, instead of being a man, could it be a woman in the lead? And the showrunner's like, well, yeah. And now and it just makes the show so much more interesting and so great. So, it's just changing that default setting in the brain that you have to do.
And you're right, Hollywood's reliant on data, sales data, and if they haven't used women, then of course their data is going to affirm the fact that women don't sell movies.
Yeah.
The watershed moment for some came at the Oscars a couple of years back with Frances McDormand talking about the inclusivity rider, which is something you have adopted. FeedCo is sort of leading the way in trying to get diverse voices to the screen, but also making sure that women are represented.
Yeah, the inclusion rider, I thought for us it was easy because we do that anyway.
Yeah.
Basically we try to, get as much diversity, in gender parity between, in front of the camera and behind the camera. I've been good in my career about doing it in front of the camera. It took me a while to kind of wake up about how bad it is behind the camera, and so I've been, spending the last several years trying to right that wrong. And we have a company that we've started called Powder Keg, which is our digital arm. But for us, it's a way we produce webisodes and just in short films so that we can kind of create this farm team of new female filmmakers and people of color and LGBTQ. Oh God, I can't talk today. To get their voices out there and give them an opportunity in a lower pressure situation of making short form, so then we can go like, look, they killed this. Now we can go out and say like, look, we can vouch for this person. They can, now they can take on a feature. They can take on their own series. That kind of thing. And so.
And I think we've got a clip of one of Powder Keg's. This is short form.
Yeah, this is we did six episodes of a webisode called East of La Brea. We started. This guy is Samir Gardiza, who was a writer on a lot of mainstream sitcoms in Hollywood, but he was the only Muslim American writer in the room. He always felt very kind of like an outsider, and so he started this program called Break the Room, which basically he found like 6 brand new female Muslim American writers who he thought, we read a lot of different scripts and writing samples, found these ones who he thought were great, put everybody in a room with him, and they basically broke and wrote this 6-episode web series. And we ended up filming it. We got funding from Lyft, the rideshare place. They put in, because one of the characters plays a Lyft driver, and then we put in money from our investor in the show. And we shot them. We're trying to figure out where, we have people kind of who want it, and we're just figuring out where it goes. But I'm really proud of it.
I can't wait to see this. I haven't seen this, so here it is. This is East of La Brea, is that right?
East of La Brea, yeah.
We'll come on to that in a little bit and talk about sort of stream shows, but I just want to track back to sort of post-Heat, the enormous success of this sort of skewed, unique, beautiful rom-com, followed by Heat, where, a sort of buddy movie, but a cop movie, and then we moved to Ghostbusters, and it seems to me this was the genre that some guys did not want you to populate with women.
What do you mean, Sue? Everyone was so accepting of this film.
And in particular, of course, the horrific abuse that Leslie Jones got after her. You know, and that is a show that has 4 great characters, female characters working together, and she was targeted. Well, how do you feel in retrospect about all that? I'm going to say brouhaha, but I think shitstorm is better. Painful, negative shitstorm that no one deserved.
I mean, it was terrible. You know, I like to try to minimize it, but it was awful, and because none of us expected it. I think, you know, when I decided to do, I'd been kind of chased by Amy Pascal, who was running Sony at the time, and by Ivan Reitman, who, you know, kind of wanted me to take over the franchise, and I loved the franchise. You know, I saw the original one opening weekend when I was in film school and thought it was great, and I always went like, what a great idea. 4 funny people, scientists using technology to fight the supernatural. Like, it's a great idea that shouldn't just be limited to one movie. And so, you know, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, and then when I thought, well, okay, how would I do it? It's like, oh, I have all these really hilarious women. Let's cast them, because then we won't have comparisons to, you know, the famous men who played these. And it just seemed like so much fun. So I tweeted this thing out like, hey, I'm going to do this. You know, I got 4 hilarious women. That's who I'm going to call. And the first day, just all these people are so excited and yay, yay. And then the next morning you wake up and you're like, oh my God. And it just unleashed this thing that I'd always had a really nice relationship with the internet before that. Like, people were very supportive because they like Freaks and Geeks and they like Bridesmaids and Spy and all that stuff. So it was always this kind of friendly banter with everybody. And you know, we awoke the Gamergate guys who had, you know, destroyed lives before they came after us. And it just seems so silly to me now. I mean, people still, you know, every day on Twitter, it's like some angry guy, and it's like, dude, it's been 3 years. Like, you gotta let it go.
And the idea that you destroyed their childhood.
I know, somehow I destroyed their childhood, even though,
But they're still living it, obviously. It's like, become an adult.
I know, exactly. You know, but for me, the greatest moment was when we won Best Film at the Nickelodeon Awards. We beat like Captain America and a Star Wars movie and stuff. And you go like, well, I guess I ruined your childhood, but I think the children who actually have a child actually enjoyed the movie. So I will never apologize for that movie. Look, it's not a perfect movie. No movie is perfect. Unless, well, some are. None of mine are. But but I'm very proud of it, and I stand by it, and I would make another one in a heartbeat. But
I remember when all that was going on, and let's not sugarcoat it. I mean, what Leslie had to deal with was pure racist bile, you know, directed at her. Yeah. But I occasionally would see in your Twitter feed a mum with kids going to Halloween, and her kids were dressed as the girls from Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Oh no. And there's been women who write me say they went into engineering or they went into science because just seeing a positive role model doing science, even though it's ridiculous science in our movie, but I tried to keep it as close to kind of nuclear science as I could in it, that it's, inspired people in that way, women in that way. And so, that makes everything worth it. All these angry guys, whatever their issue is, everyone's kicking and screaming now because they're heading into the future and they don't want to be put into the future. But guess what? The future's here and you better embrace it because it ain't going away.
And you've seen us with no amount of joy, I imagine, them doing exactly the same to a whole raft of other movies that have followed on, franchise movies that they don't quite like the tone of or the casting of.
Well, what's happening now is the town is slowly realizing what a small group they are, and they're getting much, much less power. We were kind of the canary in the coal mine because nobody quite knew, and they really organized the downvote, that trailer that we put out, which was not a great trailer, but it's still, to be, every article that writes about you says Ghostbusters with the most disliked trailer in YouTube history. As an audience, if you don't know movies, you're like, oh, I guess that must be terrible. So the media allowed themselves to be pulled into the frenzy of it, and I allowed myself to comment on it. And that's my advice for everybody who's going through this now. I said, don't play into it, don't address them, don't write them, don't say it exists, because that's what they want.
But it seems to me I have a fault in the system where a few very committed people can co-opt social media, Rotten Tomatoes, whatever it is, and change the dialogue. purely based on prejudice, having not seen the film, having seen maybe a tiny pop-up trailer.
Yeah. You know what the most boring human emotion is if it's not used for something that is really important, and it's outrage. And our world runs on outrage right now. The internet runs on outrage and cat videos. So thank God for cat videos. But
they make me outraged.
Yes, see? But I'm so tired of people being so angry about stupid shit, you know? It's like, get angry about politics, about the world. Yes, stop getting angry about entertainment. Why are you so, look, I'm passionate about entertainment, but if it's about, somebody who you don't like the look of, or you don't like their race or their gender, you gotta go back in the fucking cave you came out of, man. Because it's like, I don't understand. I can't comprehend it. My kryptonite in life is bullies. I will put up with anybody. If somebody's a bully, it just sets me off because I've been bullied. All of us have in comedy.
Yeah.
And so to be living in this kind of bully society now, where, and look, politics, I'm not going to get into that, but I mean, the bullies are clearly in power at the moment. And it just, my mom used to get this whole thing about, she hated things like, I don't want to say this because Jerry Springer was just here, but like things like the Jerry Springer. So those things where it just kind of played into the basest emotions that people have. Yeah. And she was just like, it just brings the whole tone of the world down. And I've always felt that way. It's like, I don't want to wallow in this stuff and give voice to it. And I don't find it entertaining to kind of watch people fighting and being ugly to each other. I mean, that's with my movies. Even though my movies can get pretty dark and all that, I always try to make sure they're good-natured at the end of the day. I never want to make a movie that goes like, the world is shit, people are terrible, and off you go.
They're gleeful. Even when it's dark, it's gleeful. Even when people do terrible things in your movies, there's glee, there's joy, and they're sumptuous, and they're both progressive in the way that they're cast and the way that you work, but they also have this sort of real track back through to the proper old-fashioned glamour of Hollywood. Yeah. And the joy, when you go and see one of your movies, I feel different when I see one of your movies. I feel like I'm getting a kind of an experience that connects me to childhood because I'm like, I know that I'm going to be elevated. I know that I'm going to feel a frisson or something. What interests me, I forgot to say, by the way, which was very, very remiss of me, I only really have one job, that questions are invited throughout. Obviously, we'll do old-fashioned hands up in a minute. Interesting, I'm just going to throw this into the mix. We obviously talked about improv, Paul, but as a director who uses a lot of improv, do you think drama could favour this approach?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, improv is such a tricky word because it doesn't mean like, we're just going to go crazy. It just means not sticking like letter, word perfect to something, making it your own. And when I was a TV director, I learned this really interestingly because I would work on these shows that were really well written. But when you're a TV director, you're there and kind of the writer or the showrunner is with you. And so you're going and doing your notes, but then they'll be like, oh, can they do this? Can they do that? And it's like, okay, so you're kind of the conduit to get them their notes as well as what you want. And I would get these, they'd be like, well, they have to say it exactly like this. And I'm like, well, okay. So I go in and like, can you say it just like this? Well, I know, but I think it'd be this. And suddenly I'm trying to make their mouth into somebody else's mouth. And it's crazy because this person, I don't want to bust anybody, but there was like one very unique performer on a show that I was working on. And he just had an interesting way of telling a joke. And it was not, his way of telling this joke was not at all the way that this writer, would have done it. And after 15 times of me running back and forth trying to get it word perfect for this guy, suddenly that actor hated my guts. He's like, man, this is fucking bullshit. And I was like, I don't even want to be doing it. Finally, I go back to the guy and said, like, you tell him, because this is ridiculous. Like, the way he's saying it is funny, and if he says it your way, it's not going to be funny. And so anything, drama, comedy, just let the actors say it the way that is natural for them, because you're going to get something much more interesting and
they're in that. They're inhabiting. That's their job, is to take what you've written and to fashion a character that goes deep, and they will sometimes, I presume, be able to find that nuance in the expression of it.
And you know who's, the only person who's going to look bad, they can blame the director, all that, is that actor if that performance isn't good. And so I've got such sympathy for that because, like, man, you're on the front line. You are living and breathing this thing. You're the one that they're going to go, that wasn't good. What a terrible actor. So it's like, whatever I can do to help you, be your best. Because then I'll sit there, look, every director comes in with a preconceived notion. You're just like, oh, please be like this. And a lot of times somebody will do something, I'm like, what? That's so not what I wanted. That's so wrong. But you're like, okay, but my rule is just anything that's like, great, that's cool, we got that. Now let's try this, let's try that. Because I do mean it. And then I've had so many times when I get in the editing room and the take that I went like, oh God, what a terrible performance. I get in the editing room and we put it up and it's perfect because it's not, at the moment I had something else in my head, and so again, that's why I'm just like, let everybody try everything because I got to sort it out later and I don't know if I'm right or wrong and so it needs to be a democracy that way.
And again, if it's not a set text, if it's not Shakespeare, if it's not, then in drama you have the ability to let actors move around the margins of the fixed narrative and tell the thing in the way they want to. By the way, we have a technical fault, which means I can't do old-fashioned hands up and bellowing. So we will ask all the questions through the app if that's cool.
Oh, wow. So this, modern.
I know, I know. You did a simple favour recently, which I loved. At a darker level, this question says, than lots of your other projects. Can we expect a darker tone for films in the future?
You know what? My favorite thing in the world is genres. And my goal before I die is to pretty much make a movie in every genre there is. Because what I love about genres is you get this set of tropes.
Yeah.
And then you can subvert them, play with them, play into them, play against them. And that, to me, is really fun. And it provides comedy, and it also provides ways to do very interesting casting. Like Simple Favor, to put Blake Lively as this villain, who she's always plays these wonderful characters. And she just came in, she embraced it. She was so excited to do it, and she was so funny doing it. Or to take Jason Statham and, completely subvert his character from the screen and spy and make him into an idiot. Thank God for these people who are willing to do that kind of thing.
And Chris Hemsworth, in
Ghostbusters, yeah.
As sort of nerdy, as the archetypal female role of the sort of, the receptionist.
Exactly, the eye candy and
the
No, but I like dark. My new movie that's coming out is actually quite light, but it's fairly dramatic too, but funny, but dramatic and romantic and everything. So.
And we're going to get the first proper UK trailer preview in a bit, I think, of that, which will be swell. Which part, Paul, you do everything. You write, you have performed, you still do perform in your movies, you in the edit, you direct, all that. Which part of the creative process do you find most fulfilling? You said you like the edits, but is that...
Yeah, I love just the general rubric of directing. That to me is, I get to do everything I know how to do as a director because when I'm a director, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, I'm a musician, everything because, I'm an artist because I'm working with all these amazingly talented people, but then I'm able to go like, ooh, can it be this, can it be that, can it be this? And so, yeah, I think I just love the entire process. If I had to pick one part of it, I do love editing because once I've got all the pieces, that's really exciting for me because then my editor and we just go in and then you can create something completely different. And that's when it's fun, because that's when the script almost kind of goes out the window, even though it's obviously there is your blueprint, your template, but then it's like, oh, let's switch this with that, let's put this in here. And then what we call editing room jokes, which are the juxtaposition of like where we end one scene and start the other. Famous example would be, for my movies, in Bridesmaids, when she's in bed with John Hamm at the beginning and he's kind of trying to get her out, and she's so comfortable, he's like, yeah, I really want you to leave, but I don't know how to say it without sounding like a dick. Then we cut to her walking out. That's what we call a B-side joke, which is you got the setup, and then what's funny is the reveal of there she is walking out. And so it's really fun to kind of find those things, and when we stumble upon those, we're always very happy.
And jokes, of course, based on timing, and that's the thing you can fine tune in the edit, is how long you leave a look, how how long the response is.
Yeah.
We showed you Civil O'Brien. I think probably if we have time, good to talk about, and obviously a lot of your work is on television, how you see that going, whether the streaming services and the plurality of streaming services are affecting you in any way or actually enhancing your ability to tell different types of stories.
Yeah, I mean, streaming is great. I mean, we're in this time now where there's so much content.
Yeah.
And it's so much of it is really high quality. I get stressed out because I can't watch all the shows that are so good. You know, all I hear is like, oh my God, this show, and there's no time. But thank God, you know, this stuff is happening. So to me, anything that gets somebody's voice, and hopefully if it's a unique voice and if it's an underrepresented voice, even better, that's so important. I mean, we produced a movie called Someone Great for Netflix. There was this amazing writer, Jen Robinson, who created a show called Sweet Vicious that was on MTV, which is brilliant if you ever get to see it. She came to us with this movie script, and it was a great script, but she wanted to direct it. And I wanted her to direct it, but she had never directed a feature before. But she had such a vision for it, so we were able to take it around and finally took it to Netflix. And I was able to go like, I vouch that she can do this. She did this amazing presentation she created a trailer for it and a lookbook and all this stuff. And she was so confident and great that they said, sure, go ahead and do it. We made it for like $8 million, and she crushed it. She absolutely just, it's so good. If you got to check it out, it's on Netflix. And but that now she's a legitimate director by Hollywood standards, because if we had to go through a studio, it wouldn't have happened because she hadn't been anointed by the studios, but she had the talent. And that's been the biggest problem with just getting more women behind the camera, is that female directors are out there, and they're great. It's just they haven't had the opportunity, so the pool of men who have been considered to be verified is so much bigger than the pool of female directors who have been verified that if they're drawn from the pool, there's less. So we're just trying to expand that pool.
Just sort of sponsor, mentor.
Yeah, the best person should get the job, and so, but they have to have the opportunity to present themselves and their vision to get the job. I
mean, it's interesting. The statistic, recent Directors UK report shows that only 25% of the directors here are women, and you've signed up to the 4% challenge in the US. First of all, what is the 4% challenge in the US? And then perhaps as a subsidiary question, what do you think generally we can do here and in the States to improve the balance of sort of women behind camera?
Yeah, well, the 4% challenge is just a challenge out to producers to, within the next 18 months, work with a female director on a project. And, we do that all the time. So for me, that was the easiest thing in the world to sign on to. But I think every producer, anybody with any kind of power out there needs to do it, because again, you just have to create opportunity. The dirtiest thing I hear, and I hear it all the time, and I hear it from male executives and I hear it from female executives. When I'm going like, well, we have to have 50-50 parity on this, we have to have women in these roles, they're like, well, we just got to get the best person for the job. And it's like, fuck you. What does that mean? I'm saying like, oh, I don't care if she's bad, just hire her. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm saying do a deep dive and find the person who's good, who happens to be a woman, happens to be a person of color, to do that thing. But it's this weird kind of, again, this default setting of like, we don't want to take a chance. It's like, take a chance. And so, honestly, I mean, the UK is doing better than Hollywood at the moment. I mean, that number is a depressing number, but compared to the numbers in the US, it's astronomical. But the good thing is, the town has kind of been shamed into addressing the problem, and a lot more women are getting hired into directing jobs and in featured jobs. It's not enough yet, but it's at least, the spotlight is on it. And the fear is always like, it just becomes like something that they nod to and then it goes back to the way it was. And so, but I really genuinely feel like it's starting in a way that it can't backslide. I don't know. I mean, again, Hollywood's such a slippery kind of place, but that's my feeling is that I think we're going in a positive direction now.
And certainly in TV, as you say, there's so many platforms for streamed content that people can, different voices can emerge, because there's finally the space.
Yeah.
And authenticity is the big thing. You know, if you have a story, then you're the person that needs to tell it. You're the person that needs to write it, to perhaps be in front of camera or direct it.
Yeah.
And that's key. In the same way that Freaks and Geeks, admittedly you weren't in it, but it's you. It's everything about your childhood, your adolescence, the pain you felt, the bullying, the outsider culture.
Yeah.
Presented there.
Well, to me, there's nothing more exciting than seeing a story told in a way that I would never have thought how to tell it. You know, and that's why with the things we produce, I go like, I want to create the opportunity, and I'll kind of weigh in with some ideas, but I'm also like, I want to get out of your way, because you're going to have a way to tell this story that's going to be completely unique. Maybe it breaks every single rule I've ever come up with that I think I hold dear. But if then I watch and go like, shit, that's really cool. Like that, I would never. That's what I want, you know. So that's why with Powder Keg and all these things, it's like create the opportunity, get the people you trust, and let them do what they do. If they want help, or if they want a feedback, or you know, then I'm there to help out. Or if there's a problem, I can help out. But I want their voice. I want to be surprised by new voices, and I want to hear new things that I've never heard before, and see characters I haven't seen before, and I want to see lives that I haven't seen before, because this is the world we live in now. And if you don't have that kind of representation on the screen that is reflective of how the world is made up and looks, then we're just doing bullshit.
Yeah, then basically it's like visiting a museum when you go to turn on your TV or go to the movies. Mm-hmm. We have new comedy writers, I imagine plenty of them in the audience, and one has said, what advice do you have for new comedy writers starting out and wanting to stand out from the crowd?
Use your voice. You got to tell your stories. You don't have to tell small stories, but you have to tell your story. You can tell it in a big, you can take your personal story of whatever you've been through that is unique to you, and you can write it as a giant sci-fi epic. It doesn't matter. But all those trappings of production and special effects and all this stuff mean nothing if that core story doesn't engage an audience, and we don't go like, oh my God, I care about this character's, oh my God, well, look what that person's going through. That's what gets us through these things. All the other stuff is bullshit. If you have a great story in the middle of it, and then all that stuff's on top of it, then you've got the biggest hit in the world. But you gotta tell what is unique to you. Don't chase, try not to chase genre, try not to chase whatever's popular at the moment. Again, if you want to do the trappings of it, sure, but make it your personal story. It's gotta be something that is unique to you, because any of us, anybody you meet on the street, if you get them to tell some personal story, you're gonna be like, oh my God, because everybody's got a unique story to tell.
And even if you asked everybody in this room to come up with a love story, every love story would be slightly nuanced, slightly different. So it's not even about avoiding genres that are too classic. It's just, as you say, your own voice will speak out. I want to talk about your profound Anglophilia. I want to talk about, but also your deep connection with Edinburgh and Scotland.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Was it you grew up and you watched loads of British TV? Was that where the fascination came?
Yeah, well, I always have been in love with British comedy. I mean, you know, from Monty Python and The Goodies and all that kind of stuff. You know, and just, you know, Are You Being Served? I mean, all of them. I just love them all. And
Are You Being Served?
Yes.
I love the idea that the director of some of the greatest comedy movies of all time, Are You Being Served?
I'm telling you, it's all genius. And there's something about, just because it's verbal comedy, but it's also kind of silly at the same time. There's a playfulness about it that I really like. There's a morality to it, and that a lot of times Brits will have unlikable lead characters, whereas in the States we can't do that at all. You know, I was involved with The Office.
Yeah.
You know, right towards the beginning, and the first 6 they did, which was their truncated first season, was very true to the British one, where Steve Carell's character was as unlikable as Ricky's character was, and the American public were just like, we can't take this. And so what happened was 40-Year-Old Virgin had come out in the interim and was a big hit. And so they go, well, Steve Carell, everybody loves him, but why don't they like him in this? And it's like, well, I guess we've got to get him a few like redeemable qualities. You know, so he has to have like a victory occasionally. He has to do something then surprise you that he actually did something kind of smart. And that's just the way that American audiences kind of process things. But then it turned it into a giant hit. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a sort of brutality that we can allow in British comedy. And Monty Python's example of that, some savage stuff playing against some very broad absurdist
Yeah.
laughs as well. But then I look at that scene, that epic scene in Bridesmaids that we just showed with the sort of gastrointestinal collapse, the domino effect that goes on. And what's extraordinary is you've got really grand big performances and sound effects and all that. But then you've got Kristen's character, and it's so nuanced, and it's almost like she's in a drama, just holding it together. Right. It's glacial and classy. It's amazing.
Well, that was the genesis of that scene, was actually, because people look at that and they just remember all the vomiting and farting and all that stuff. But for us, what the funny thing about that scene, it was always about what happens when you do something, you screw up, and in the face of overwhelming evidence, you keep pretending everything's okay. And so the most important part of that scene is just Kristen sweating, trying to eat that stupid Jordan almond, and everything else is going wrong. And so that's what. But again, that's the human element. What so many people have subsequently taken away is like, oh, you just have to have all this gross out stuff. It's like, no, you have to have a core in the middle where you're like, oh God, yes, what would I do if everybody, I made some decision to take us to a shitty restaurant because I couldn't afford a better one, and I'm passing it off like it's okay.
But that rivalry between those two, just at that, she's just the makeup there just makes me cry with laughter, the slight glistening of the face.
Well, that's the genius of Kristen Wiig, because when we were gonna do that, she said, I need a spritzer. And so she had one of those little Evian spritzers, and so she'd do a line, spray her face, do her line, spray her face, and it just, every time we cut, it's more and more sweat.
And it's brilliant. We've got one final question, which I love. As a gentleman of clear sartorial elegance,
Thank you.
Where do you stand on kilts?
I got married in a kilt, that's all I'm gonna say, yes.
You own the room again.
And I did it the Scottish way, too, if you know what I mean. Yes. Because at one point, I was picked up by a bunch of people on their shoulders, and everybody saw.
Big John and the twins.
Yeah, exactly. My haggis was out, exactly.
Let the junk roam free, I say. Always, always.
Here.
I expect nothing else that you love a kilt. We're really lucky because we have, as I teased before, the trailer for your last movie. That's your latest movie, not your last
What do you know that I don't know?
Sorry, news just in, Paul. Shit's got real. Latest, apologies. End of the festival. Your latest movie. Will you take us through this? It premieres on the 11th of November, is that right?
No, we open here on the 15th of November. 15th. We open in the States on the 8th. Our premiere in London is on the 11th. But this is my love letter to London. Emma Thompson wrote this movie. She sent it to me. I was supposed to do late night with her, and then our scheduling fell apart, but we became friendly after that. And she, out of the blue, sent me this script and said, hey, I think we'd have a lot of fun doing this. I read this script and was just like, oh my God, I'd do anything to make this movie. But I've also, like I say, I'm such an Anglophile, I've always wanted to make a love letter to London. And so this is my love letter to London.
And boy, does London look beautiful in this, and added to which the sumptuous songs of the late George Michael. So here, for you, is the beautiful trailer. Ladies and gentlemen, we saved the very best for the very end of the festival. Please give a round of applause to the magnificent Paul Feig.
Oh, thank you.